horrifying. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the poorest woman inside a luxury hotel turned out to be the only one who could save it from collapse? Even more terrifying. What if she was deaf, looked down on, publicly humiliated, and the only person who stood by her side was a mafia boss hiding his true identity? If you fail, you will disappear from this city as if you never existed. That was the sentence passed on Clara Hayes, a homeless mother, a woman the world treated as invisible. But no one knew that on that freezing night, with her bare feet pressed against the cold wooden floor, she heard something that millions of dollars could never buy. And when the truth was finally exposed, what collapsed wasn't just the sound system, but everyone who had ever looked down on her. And this is where the story truly begins. Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions, or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. All right, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. My name is Clara Hayes, and in October of the year 2025, I had almost forgotten what it felt like to wake up without fear. The Chicago wind whipped down the narrow service alley behind the LondonHouse hotel, slicing through my threadbare coat as I pushed my cleaning cart toward the staff entrance at 4 a.m. I was 32, but hunger and sleepless nights had carved years into my face. My hands trembled from the cold and from low blood sugar. I had given Eli the last slice of bread the night before. Eli, my 9-year-old son, was asleep on a cot in the church basement shelter 3 miles away, guarded only by a volunteer who had promised to watch him until my shift ended at 7. Every minute away from him felt like a gamble with fate. I was profoundly deaf, like Eli, and the world moved in silence around me. I read lips when people bothered to face me, felt vibrations through floors and walls, and spoke in a soft, careful voice that many dismissed as weak. Poverty had stripped everything else away. We had been evicted from our last apartment in August when the landlord raised the rent again. Since then, we had drifted between shelters, church basements, and, on the worst nights, the 24-hour laundromat on Halsted Street, where the dryers gave off enough heat to keep us from freezing. My body was thin, malnourished, ribs visible beneath the uniform that hung loose on my frame. Sleep came in stolen fragments, always interrupted by worry or the need to move before security chased us away. The LondonHouse was a palace of glass and marble on Michigan Avenue, where guests paid thousands a night for views of the river and the city lights. I worked the graveyard shift as dishwasher and overnight cleaner because it paid $12 an hour, $3 more than day shift, and because the rooftop concert venue was empty after midnight. There, alone among the velvet seats and crystal chandeliers, I could take off my worn sneakers and press my bare feet to the polished oak floor, feeling the faint memory of music that had played hours earlier. Vibration was the only sound I had ever known, and in those quiet moments, I chased it like a starving person chases warmth. That was how I first noticed the problem with the acoustics. For weeks, the rooftop venue had been plagued by a strange, painful distortion that appeared exactly 22 minutes into every performance, forcing emergency shutdowns. Famous musicians clutched their ears. Guests demanded refunds. Engineers flew in from both coasts, their bills running into the tens of thousands, yet no one could find the cause. The owner, Evelyn Whitaker, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s who wore designer suits and spoke to staff as if we were furniture, grew more furious by the day. I had seen her once, standing in the kitchen doorway, looking straight at me and saying loudly to a manager, "Tell the silent girl to stop leaving water spots on the glasses. She can't even hear when they're clean." The manager had laughed. I had lowered my eyes and kept scrubbing. But every night, alone on the rooftop, I felt the discord through the floor, a subtle mismatch, like two heartbeats fighting to find the same rhythm. I had studied acoustics in stolen hours at the public library, teaching myself from books and free videos online. I knew something the engineers did not. Yet who would listen to a destitute dishwasher who could not even keep a roof over her child's head? That first week in October, a new night porter started on the crew. The others called him Jack Riley. He was tall, fair-skinned, with steel gray hair and eyes the color of a winter lake. He moved with quiet authority, repairing broken fixtures or hauling trash bags as if the work was temporary. There was something different about him. His clothes were worn, but his watch caught the light in a way that suggested money, and his hands were strong but uncalloused, as if they were more used to giving orders than lifting boxes. When our paths crossed in the service corridor, he always stepped aside with a small nod, and once, when a heavy trash bin nearly tipped on me, he caught it effortlessly. I murmured a timid, "Thank you, sir," my voice soft and polite, the way a much younger woman might speak to someone older and stronger. He only looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression, before walking on. I did not know then that Jack Riley was really Vincent Callahan, 45 years old, the most powerful organized crime figure in Chicago. Vincent controlled construction unions, waste contracts, and gambling operations across the city. His wealth measured in hundreds of millions. He lived in a Gold Coast penthouse with private elevators and bulletproof glass, drove cars that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, and commanded loyalty through fear and favor. Yet beneath the power gnawed a consuming remorse. His 8-year-old twins, Grace and Michael, had been born profoundly deaf. He had hidden their condition from everyone in his world, terrified it would be seen as vulnerability. The guilt ate at him nightly. The lives he had ruined to build his empire, the violence he could never fully wash away, the fear that his children would face a world that dismissed them as he had once dismissed others. Desperate to understand the life his twins would lead without his protection, Vincent had arranged a long business trip as cover, disguised himself with gray dye and plain clothes, and taken the night porter job to live among ordinary people. To see how the world treated those who could not hear. The second week brought colder nights. One evening, as I walked Eli to the free after-school program for deaf children in Uptown, a black SUV slowed beside us. 3 men inside stared, one shouting something I could not hear but read on his lips. Ugly words about my deafness, about Eli. Terror flooded me. I clutched Eli's hand and hurried away, my legs unsteady, dizziness making the sidewalk tilt. We made it to the center just as my knees buckled from panic and hunger. Unseen, Vincent, still disguised as Jack, had been nearby, picking up supplies for the hotel. He recognized the SUV as belonging to a rival Southside crew pushing into his territory. A cold fury rose in him, mixed with the familiar remorse. He made one phone call. 20 minutes later, in an empty lot near the river, his men confronted the 3 rivals. No shots were fired, just hard stares, low voices, and the implied promise of consequences. "Stay out of Uptown," his lieutenant said. The SUV drove away. Vincent watched from the shadows, heart pounding with the old, violent conflict inside him, protecting what was his, yet hating the necessity. Days later, the shelter turned us away because it was full. Rain poured down as Eli and I huddled under the awning of a closed CVS pharmacy, his small body shivering against mine. I signed promises into his palm. "We'll be warm soon, baby," while silent tears mixed with the rain on my face. The unfairness clawed at me. Why did the world punish children for their mother's failures? Numbness spread through my limbs until I could barely feel Eli's weight. Then, one dawn, as I left the hotel, exhausted and lightheaded, I turned into the alley and found Jack Riley waiting by the staff door. He held out a paper bag from a nearby diner, still warm. Inside were eggs, hash browns, and a container of oatmeal for Eli. He signed, slow and careful, "You both need to eat." I stared, shock and confusion crashing over me like a wave. No one had shown me kindness without wanting something in return. My hands shook as I signed back, soft and timid. "Why are you helping us, sir?" He only looked at me with those Winter Lake eyes, something fierce and tender fighting behind them. In that moment, watching my thin fingers sign gratitude, Vincent felt it, an overwhelming surge, passionate and undeniable. Not pity, love, sudden, intense, tearing through every defense he had built over decades. Guilt roared alongside it. How dare he, a man with blood on his hands, feel this for a woman whose life he could save with a single phone call? Yet the feeling consumed him, violent in its depth. I did not know any of this. I only knew that for the first time in years, someone had seen me, not as broken, not as silent, but as human. And in the quiet space between us, something began to shift, fragile and terrifying, in my starving heart. The last days of October in the year 2025 brought a sharper chill to Chicago, the kind that slipped under doors and settled in the bones. I felt it most when I stepped out of the LondonHouse at 7 in the morning, my uniform damp from kitchen steam, my stomach hollow after another night of giving Eli whatever food I could scrounge. The city was waking up around me, delivery trucks idling on Wacker Drive, commuters hurrying toward the L train with paper cups of coffee that cost more than my hourly wage. I watched them through the fog of exhaustion and felt the familiar ache of being on the outside of everything warm and safe. Inside the hotel, the crisis over the rooftop concert venue had grown into a storm. The distortion that struck exactly 22 minutes into every performance was no longer a mere inconvenience. It was a threat to the hotel's reputation and to the legendary New Year's Eve gala that drew the city's wealthiest and most powerful guests. Engineers in expensive jackets arrived daily, spreading blueprints across the marble lobby tables and speaking in urgent tones about harmonic resonance and digital signal processing. Their invoices, I overheard from the kitchen staff, ran into the hundreds of thousands. Yet night after night, the problem returned, worse than before, until musicians began canceling bookings and whispers of lawsuits drifted through the corridors. Evelyn Whitaker, the owner, moved through the hotel like a blade. She was 53, tall and immaculate, with ash blonde hair always pulled into a severe knot, and suits that cost more than I earned in a year. Her voice carried the clipped authority of someone who had never once doubted her right to command. Staff scattered when she appeared. I had seen her reduce a concierge to tears with a single sentence and fire a housekeeper on the spot for a crooked name tag. To Evelyn, we were not people. We were functions that either worked or were replaced. One afternoon toward the end of October, I was scrubbing the service elevator when she swept past with two of the New York engineers. She stopped abruptly, her eyes fixing on me as if noticing a stain on the wall. "You," she said, loud enough for the engineers to hear. "The silent girl. Do you even understand how much money your incompetence is costing me every time those glasses come back spotted?" I froze, hands dripping soapy water onto the floor. My voice came out small and timid. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll redo them." She gave a short, dismissive laugh and walked on, heels clicking like gunshots. The engineers smirked. Heat flooded my face, humiliation so sharp it felt like physical pain. I was 32 years old, a mother, and still reduced to this. That same week brought more unfairness, piled on like stones until I could barely breathe beneath the weight. The church basement shelter closed for repairs without warning, leaving Eli and me with nowhere to go. We spent 3 nights in a 24-hour McDonald's booth, me pretending to nurse a small coffee while Eli slept with his head on my lap. The manager finally asked us to leave at dawn. Another night, we sheltered under the Michigan Avenue Bridge, the wind off the river so cold it burned. I wrapped Eli in my coat, pressing his small body against mine, signing over and over into his palm that everything would be all right, while silent tears froze on my cheeks. My body ached with malnutrition. Dizziness came in waves so strong I had to lean against walls to stay upright. Sleep was a luxury I could no longer remember. Yet every night at the hotel, in the quiet after the guests had gone, I returned to the rooftop venue. I removed my shoes and walked barefoot across the vast oak floor, feeling the lingering discord through my soles, the subtle war between the American digital processors and the Swiss acoustic panels that no one else seemed able to detect. My mind, sharpened by desperation, pieced together the mismatch of tolerances, the way imperial assumptions clashed with metric precision. I knew the answer, or part of it, but the thought of speaking up, of drawing Evelyn's attention again, filled me with terror. Jack Riley was there more often now. He appeared silently, repairing light fixtures or adjusting stage rigging with steady hands. Sometimes he brought food, simple things, a turkey sandwich wrapped in foil, a container of hot soup, and left them on my cart without a word. When our eyes met, he signed slowly, carefully, asking if Eli was warm enough, if we had eaten. His signs were fluent, confident, the signs of someone who had learned for love, not obligation. Each small kindness struck me like a blow, stirring suspicion and a guarded curiosity I could not afford. Why would a night porter care? What did he want? Yet beneath the fear, something else flickered. Confusion, a dizzying warmth that made my heart race and my balance unsteady. Across the city, Vincent Callahan's world pressed in with increasing force. Rival crews from the west side, sensing his supposed absence on business, grew bolder. One night, as I walked Eli home from the after-school program along a dimly lit stretch of Clark Street, a dark sedan pulled alongside us. 2 men got out, blocking the sidewalk. One reached toward Eli, smirking. Panic exploded in my chest, horror so complete the world narrowed to a tunnel. I pulled Eli behind me, my legs trembling, ready to fight with nothing but my thin body. They never touched us. Headlights flared from an alley and 3 men emerged, silent, purposeful. I recognized none of them, but the rivals did. Words were exchanged, low and rapid. No blows landed, but the threat hung heavy in the air. The sedan sped away. The 3 strangers melted into the shadows without a glance at us. I stood shaking, numbness spreading through my limbs until I sank to the curb, clutching Eli, tears coming in violent, silent sobs. Vincent had watched the entire confrontation from a parked car half a block away. His lieutenant had handled it cleanly, as ordered. But seeing Clara, thin, malnourished, fiercely protective despite her frailty, shield her son with her own body, tore something open inside him. The love that had begun as a surge now burned with violent intensity, passionate and all-consuming. Guilt roared alongside it. A man like him, whose wealth came from fear and control, daring to feel this for a woman whose life was unraveling thread by thread? Remorse clawed at him, the lives he had damaged, the blood he could never wash away, now sharpened by the knowledge that he could end her suffering with a single command, yet feared tainting her with his darkness. Back at the hotel, the acoustic crisis reached its peak. A world-famous string quartet had canceled after the distortion injured a violinist's hearing. Evelyn raged through the staff corridors, threatening mass firings. In a packed emergency meeting in the grand ballroom, attended by investors and city officials, she paced like a predator. Her gaze swept the room and landed on Jack Riley, quietly fixing a flickering stage light. "If our porter is so handy," she announced coldly, her voice carrying to every corner, "perhaps our deaf dishwasher can solve what the finest engineers in the country cannot. Clara Hayes, if you can make this venue perfect by New Year's Eve, I will consider a promotion. But when you fail, as you certainly will, you will leave this hotel with no reference and no mercy." Laughter rippled through the room, cruel, dismissive. Cameras from the local news captured every moment. I stood frozen near the service door, blood draining from my face. Dizziness crashed over me. The floor seemed to tilt. Shock, confusion, humiliation so deep it felt like drowning. Why me? Why this public cruelty? Vincent's heart stopped, then pounded with a fury he had not felt in years. The woman he loved, thin from hunger, exhausted from fighting for her child, was being offered up for sport. The passionate fire inside him flared into something fierce and protective, tearing at every remnant of caution. Yet the remorse followed instantly. His world of power and wealth had taught him to crush enemies, not shield innocence. The conflict raged violently within him, love against guilt, desire against fear of destroying her with his touch. I met his eyes across the room. For a moment, the noise faded. In that winter-late gaze, I saw something raw and desperate, a mirror to my own hidden torment. Suspicion lingered, but beneath it, a fragile curiosity bloomed, confusing, frightening, impossible to ignore. The storm had only begun. November arrived in Chicago like a slow punishment, the temperature dropping into the 30s at night, the wind finding every tear in my coat as if it had a personal grudge. I was thinner now, my collarbones sharp beneath the uniform, my face drawn from weeks of splitting meager meals with Eli. Sleep had become a stranger. When it came, it was shallow and filled with dreams of doors slamming shut, eviction notices, shelter beds taken, Eli's small hand slipping from mine in a crowd. I woke gasping, heart pounding in the silence that was my world. At the LondonHouse, I moved like a ghost. The day staff barely noticed me. The night crew nodded but kept their distance. I was the deaf dishwasher, the silent cleaner who worked alone on the rooftop after the last guest left. No one asked how I was or if Eli was safe. Poverty had made me invisible long before deafness ever did. I scrubbed pots until my fingers bled, mopped miles of marble until my back screamed, and still the paychecks barely covered bus fare and a few cans of soup. One week in early November, the food pantry line was too long. We waited 3 hours in the rain, only to be told supplies had run out. Eli's eyes filled with quiet tears as we walked home empty-handed. I signed promises I could not keep, my own heart tearing with a violence that left me numb. Yet every night, in the vast emptiness of the rooftop concert venue, I found a strange refuge. The distortion problem had worsened. Performances now ended in chaos, guests clutching their ears, musicians threatening legal action. Engineers came and went, their equipment cluttering the stage, their voices loud with frustration. I watched from the shadows, feeling the discord through the floorboards, a violent mismatch of vibrations that built like pressure in a closed pipe until it burst. My self-taught knowledge, pieced together from library books and stolen hours on a cracked library computer, told me the cause. The American digital processors expecting imperial tolerances, clashing with the Swiss panels built to micron-precise metric standards. I knew how to quiet it, or thought I did, but the memory of Evelyn Whitaker's public humiliation in the ballroom kept my mouth shut. Who would believe a destitute, deaf woman over men with degrees and six-figure contracts? Jack Riley was the only one who seemed to see me. He appeared more often now, silent as a shadow, bringing small offerings, a thermos of hot chocolate left on my cart, thick socks folded neatly beside the mop bucket. once a child-size winter coat in Eli's exact size. Each gift struck deeper than the last. I watched him warily, suspicion coiling tight in my chest. Kindness from strangers always came with a price. I had learned that lesson young. Yet his signs were gentle, patient, asking nothing in return. When he signed, "How is Eli?" or "Did you eat today?" my guarded heart cracked a little further. Confusion swirled with the fear. Why did this man, older and stronger, look at me with eyes that held winter storms? Curiosity grew despite myself, a dangerous warmth that made my pulse unsteady. One freezing night in mid-November, the unfairness reached a new low. The shelter we had counted on was raided by immigration officials, families scattered in panic. Eli and I ended up on the Red Line train, riding end to end until dawn because it was warm and moving. I held him against me, his small body finally asleep, while cold wind rattled the windows and tears slid silently down my face. My legs went numb from sitting. Dizziness came in waves so strong I gripped the seat to keep from falling. When we finally stepped off at dawn, frost covered the platform, and I realized I had lost one of my gloves somewhere in the night. That same evening, as I walked Eli to the after-school program through a darkening neighborhood near Division Street, trouble found us again. A group of 4 men from a rival crew, tattoos visible beneath open jackets, stepped out of a doorway, blocking our path. One reached for Eli's backpack, grinning. Horror flooded me, black spots dancing at the edges of my vision. I pushed Eli behind me, ready to scream, though no sound would come, my body shaking with terror and rage. They never laid a hand on us. 2 cars screeched to a halt, doors opening. 5 men emerged, Vincent's soldiers, though I did not know it then. The standoff was brief but electric. Low voices, hard stares, one rival pulling a knife only to have it knocked away without a blow landing. "Wrong street," Vincent's lieutenant said calmly. The 4 backed off, muttering threats but retreating. Eli clung to my leg, trembling. I stood frozen, numbness spreading until my knees buckled and I sank to the cold sidewalk, pulling him into my arms. Silent sobs racked me, relief, fear, confusion crashing together in a storm that left me dizzy and disoriented. Vincent watched from the shadows of a nearby storefront, his heart torn by a violence deeper than any street confrontation. Seeing Clara, fragile, fiercely protective, her body thin from hunger yet standing like a shield between danger and her child, ignited the love inside him into a burning inferno. It was no longer a surge, it was a consuming fire, passionate and absolute. Yet the remorse followed instantly, gnawing with teeth sharper than ever. How could a man whose empire was built on fear and control dare to love a woman whose every day was a battle against cruelty? The inner conflict raged, desire to protect her warring with terror of dragging her into his darkness, guilt over past sins, over the lives damaged to maintain his wealth, now focused on this one fragile woman who deserved better than him. Back at the hotel, the acoustic crisis deepened. A nationally televised holiday concert was canceled, costing the LondonHouse millions in lost revenue and prestige. Evelyn's fury became a living thing. Staff whispered of coming layoffs. I kept my head down, scrubbing harder, moving faster, as if invisibility could protect me from her wrath. One dawn, as I pushed my cart toward the service elevator, Jack appeared beside me. He signed, slowly, deliberately. "I know you feel the problem in the venue. I've seen you on the floor at night." My breath caught. Shock rippled through me, followed by a dizzying wave of fear. How long had he watched? What did he want? Yet his eyes held no threat, only that same winter storm intensity, now softened with something that made my heart stutter. I signed back, voice soft when I spoke the words aloud, timid and polite. "It's not my place, sir. No one would listen." He stepped closer, careful not to crowd me, and signed, "I am listening." The simple sentence struck like lightning. For the first time in years, someone saw not my deafness, not my poverty, but me, the knowledge I carried, the solutions I held silent out of fear. In that quiet corridor, with the distant hum of the waking city around us, something shifted. Suspicion lingered, but beneath it, a fragile trust began to root. Curiosity burned brighter, mingled with a warmth I dared not name. And across from me, Vincent felt the fire roar higher, love and remorse twisting together in a torment that threatened to consume him whole. The invisible woman was beginning to be seen, but the cost of being seen, I feared, might be more than either of us could bear. The last week of November in the year 2025 felt like the edge of a cliff. Snow flurries danced over the Chicago River, and the temperature rarely climbed above freezing. My body had begun to shut down in small, quiet ways. Fingers that fumbled with buttons, legs that buckled on stairs, a constant tremor from cold and hunger. Eli had developed a cough that rattled in his chest at night, and I lay awake beside him on whatever thin mattress or bench we could find, counting each breath, terrified it would be his last. The food bank turned us away twice because our names were not on the new list. A church soup kitchen ran out before we reached the front of the line. One morning, I fainted in the hotel locker room, coming to with my cheek against cold tile and a coworker shaking me, asking if I needed a doctor I could not afford. At the LondonHouse, the rooftop crisis had become a daily emergency. The New Year's Eve gala was 6 weeks away, fully booked with tickets costing thousands each, sponsors demanding assurances, the mayor's office calling for updates. Engineers worked around the clock, their equipment crowding the once elegant venue. The distortion now struck with vicious precision. Exactly 22 minutes into every test, a painful feedback loop that made even hardened technicians wince. Rumors spread of permanent hearing damage to a cellist. The story made the local news. Evelyn Whitaker's composure cracked in private. Staff overheard her screaming at consultants over the phone, threatening lawsuits, promising heads would roll. I kept silent, scrubbing harder, moving faster, trying to disappear. But Jack Riley's presence grew steadier. He appeared at the end of my shifts with quiet offerings, a warm blanket folded in my locker, a prepaid bus card with $50 loaded, once a small envelope containing $200 in cash, and a note signed simply, "For Eli's medicine." Each act pierced me deeper. Suspicion coiled tighter. Why would a porter have that kind of money? What price would come later? Yet the warmth of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years, left me dizzy with confusion and a guarded, aching hope. One bitter evening, as Eli and I walked from the library where we had spent the day staying warm, danger closed in again. 3 men from the same West Side crew stepped from an alley near Ashland Avenue, blocking the sidewalk. One grabbed Eli's sleeve, pulling him toward a waiting car. The world narrowed to a tunnel of horror. I lunged, clawing, kicking, silent screams tearing from my throat, though no sound emerged. Pain exploded in my side as a blow landed, knocking me to the frozen ground. Dizziness swallowed me. Numbness spread until I could barely feel Eli's terrified face above mine. They never took him. Tires screeched, doors slammed. 4 men, Vincent's soldiers, surrounded the 3 in seconds. The standoff was swift and wordless. Hard eyes, subtle shifts of weight, one rival's hand frozen inches from a weapon. "Not here," Vincent's lieutenant said, voice low and final. The 3 backed away, cursing but retreating. Strong arms lifted me gently. Someone wrapped Eli in a coat. I drifted in and out, shock and pain blurring everything into gray. Vincent watched from across the street, concealed in the shadows of a closed storefront. The sight of Clara on the ground, thin frame curled protectively even in unconsciousness, blood on her lip, defending her child with the last of her strength, ripped through him like a blade. The love that had burned steadily now erupted into a wildfire, passionate and absolute, consuming every careful boundary he had built. He wanted to cross the street, gather her up, carry her and Eli to the Gold Coast penthouse, where no wind would ever touch them again. Yet remorse followed instantly, violent and gnawing. His absence, his disguise, had left her vulnerable. The empire that gave him millions had also painted targets on streets she walked. Guilt over past sins, debts collected too harshly, rivals intimidated into ruin, now focused into a single unbearable point. He did not deserve to touch her. Back at the hotel 2 nights later, the crisis meeting filled the grand ballroom. Investors in tailored suits, city officials, sponsors, and local press packed the room. Evelyn paced the stage, face pale with fury. Her gaze swept the crowd and landed on Jack Riley, quietly adjusting a microphone stand at the edge. A cruel smile curved her lips. She seized the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, voice amplified and icy, "we have exhausted every conventional solution. Perhaps it is time for unconventional ones. If our night porter is so skilled with his hands, maybe our deaf dishwasher can succeed where the finest acoustic engineers in America have failed." The room stilled. Heads turned. Cameras swiveled. "Clara Hayes," Evelyn continued, eyes finding me near the service door, where I stood frozen with my cleaning cart. "You have until New Year's Eve to make this venue perfect. Succeed, and I will consider a management position. Fail, and you will leave this hotel immediately, with no reference, no severance, and my personal assurance that no luxury property in this city will ever employ you again." Laughter rippled, sharp, disbelieving, cruel. Phones rose to record. The local news anchor's eyes widened with the scent of a viral story. Humiliation crashed over me in waves. Shock rooted me to the spot. Dizziness made the chandelier lights spin. My legs went numb. I gripped the cart to stay upright. Tears burned, but I blinked them back. Why this public cruelty? Why offer impossible stakes to someone already broken? Vincent's world narrowed to a single point of rage. The woman he loved, malnourished, exhausted, fighting every day for her child's survival, was being sacrificed for sport, her dignity stripped in front of Chicago's elite. The passionate fire inside him flared into something fierce and protective, tearing at every remnant of restraint. He wanted to step forward, reveal himself, end Evelyn's career with one phone call to investors he quietly controlled. Yet remorse held him frozen. Exposing his identity now would drag Clara into a world of danger she could not imagine. The inner conflict was violent, a storm that threatened to shatter him. I met his eyes across the ballroom. In that winter-late gaze, I saw agony mirroring my own, raw, desperate, tender. For a heartbeat, the laughter faded. Something passed between us, wordless and deep. Recognition, shared torment, a promise neither of us yet understood. Evelyn's voice cut through again. "Do we have a response, Miss Hayes?" My throat closed. The room waited. I forced my voice out, soft, timid, barely audible. "Yes, ma'am. I'll try." More laughter. Cameras flashed. I turned and pushed my cart toward the service corridor, legs shaking, vision blurring with unshed tears. Behind me, the meeting dissolved into excited chatter, the cruel wager already spreading across social media, the deaf dishwasher versus the impossible. In the empty hallway, I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I sat on the cold floor. Silent sobs shook me. The unfairness was a weight crushing my chest, poverty that starved my child, cold that bit my bones, and now this public spectacle designed for my failure. Footsteps approached. Jack, Vincent, knelt beside me, careful not to touch. He signed slowly, eyes fierce with emotion. "You are not alone." I looked up, confusion and fear warring with a sudden, desperate need to believe him. The invisible woman had been thrust into the cruelest light, but in that moment, one man's gaze promised shadow and shelter. The wager was set. The storm was coming. And something inside both of us had already begun to break open. December crept into Chicago with a vengeance, the wind howling off the lake like a living thing, temperatures plunging into the teens at night. Snow piled in dirty heaps along the sidewalks, and every breath hung white in the air. My body had reached its limit, ribs stark beneath thin skin, hands cracked and bleeding from harsh soap and cold water, eyes ringed with purple from weeks without real rest. Eli's cough had worsened. I spent what little money I had on children's cough syrup that did nothing. One night, the only shelter with open beds was across the city, and the last bus had already gone. We walked 3 miles in the snow, Eli's small boots soaked through, my own feet numb inside holes in the soles. When we finally reached the door, a sign read, "Full, no entry." I stood there in the blowing snow, holding Eli against me, silent tears freezing on my lashes. The unfairness was a knife twisting slowly. A mother and child turned away into the dark because there was simply no room. At the LondonHouse, the cruel wager hung over every shift like a storm cloud. Staff whispered behind my back. Some pitied, most mocked. Evelyn Whitaker walked the halls with a satisfied smile, as if she had already won. Engineers watched me with open skepticism when I passed, one even laughing aloud. The viral video of the ballroom announcement had spread across social media. Millions of views, thousands of comments calling it corporate entertainment, predicting my spectacular failure. I kept my head down, scrubbing harder, moving faster, but inside I was breaking. Dizziness came in constant waves now. Twice I nearly dropped a stack of plates, earning sharp reprimands. Hunger gnawed so fiercely that the smell of leftover banquet food made me lightheaded with need. Jack Riley, Vincent, was the only steady presence. He appeared at the edges of my vision, silent and watchful. Food continued to arrive. Warm containers of stew left in my locker, fresh fruit wrapped carefully, once a small pharmacy bag with pediatric cough medicine and a note for Eli's chest. Each gift deepened the confusion tearing at my heart. Suspicion lingered. Why this sustained kindness from a man who seemed to have means far beyond a porter's wage? Yet fear began to give way to a guarded curiosity that frightened me more. When he signed, "Are you warm enough?" or "Did Eli sleep?" his winter lake eyes held something I had never been offered, genuine concern. One dawn in early December, after a shift that left me swaying with exhaustion, he waited by the service elevator. He signed slowly, deliberately. "I know you have the answer for the venue. I have seen how you feel the floor." My breath caught. Shock rippled through me, followed by a rush of fear so strong my knees weakened. How much had he observed? I signed back, voice soft and timid when I spoke aloud. "Please, sir, it's not my place. They'll only laugh harder." He stepped closer, not crowding, never crowding, and signed, "They are wrong. You are not invisible to me." The words struck like a physical blow. For years, no one had seen past my deafness, my poverty, my desperation. Now this man looked at me as if I carried something precious. Dizziness washed over me. I gripped the wall to stay upright. Confusion and a sudden aching warmth crashed together, leaving me trembling. Across the city that same week, rival crews grew bolder. Vincent's prolonged absence had created whispers of weakness. One evening, as Eli and I hurried from a free clinic with a borrowed inhaler, a black SUV cut us off near Humboldt Park. 4 men emerged, faces hard, one calling out taunts I read on his lips. Terror flooded me. Horror so complete the snow seemed to spin. I pulled Eli behind me, heart pounding, ready to fight with nothing but my malnourished body. The confrontation ended before it began. 3 vehicles boxed the SUV in seconds. Vincent's men stepped out, calm, purposeful. Words were exchanged, low and edged with steel. No hands were raised, but the rivals backed down, tires spinning on ice as they fled. A warm car pulled alongside us. A kind-faced driver signed, "Get in, safe ride home." I hesitated, suspicion flaring, but Eli's shivering decided me. We rode in stunned silence to the temporary shelter, warmth enveloping us for the first time in days. Vincent watched from a distance, knuckles white on the steering wheel of his unmarked car. The sight of Clara, thin arms wrapped protectively around her son, face pale with fear yet fierce with love, ignited the fire inside him into a blaze that threatened to consume everything. The love was no longer a surge. It was a raging torrent, passionate, absolute, tearing through every wall he had built over decades of power and isolation. He wanted to step into the light, reveal himself, sweep her and Eli into the safety of his world where no cold would ever touch them again. Yet remorse followed instantly, violent and suffocating. His empire's shadow had drawn those rivals close. His disguise had left her vulnerable longer. Guilt over blood spilled to maintain control, over lives bent to his will, now crystallized into agony. He, the man who owned half of Chicago's construction unions and lived in penthouses with private helipads, dared to love a woman whose every day was a fight against starvation and frostbite. Later that night, alone on the empty rooftop, I removed my shoes and walked the floor one more time, feeling the discord that haunted the venue. Tears came unbidden, the weight of the wager, the mockery, the knowledge that failure meant losing even this terrible job. I sank to my knees, palms pressed to the oak, silent sobs shaking my thin frame. Footsteps approached, soft, deliberate. Jack knelt beside me, keeping space. He signed gently, "Tell me what you feel." Hesitation gripped me, fear and suspicion warring with desperation. But his eyes held no judgment, only that winter storm intensity now softened with something that made my heart stutter. Haltingly, I signed and spoke aloud, voice trembling and polite. The processors expect imperial measurements. The Swiss panels are metric, too precise. The mismatch builds resonance until it breaks. His eyes widened, then filled with recognition and fierce admiration. He signed back, "You are right. I knew you would be." In that quiet, condensed moment under the dim house lights, something ignited. I looked at him fully, tall, strong, fair-skinned, gray-streaked hair falling across his forehead, and felt a rush so powerful it stole my breath. Confusion, fear, curiosity crashed together into a dizzying warmth that spread through my frozen limbs. For the first time, a man saw my mind, my worth, not my brokenness. Vincent felt it too, the spark catching into flame. The woman before him, malnourished yet brilliant, destitute yet unbreakable, was the missing piece of his fractured soul. Love roared through him, passionate and burning, violent in its certainty. Remorse followed instantly. He could end her suffering tomorrow, yet feared the cost of bringing her close. The inner conflict tore at him with claws, desire against guilt, power against unworthiness. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. The touch was electric. I did not move. Neither of us spoke. In the stillness, the first spark leaped between us, fragile, terrifying, impossible to ignore. Outside, snow began to fall past the vast windows, blanketing Chicago in white silence. Inside, 2 tormented hearts had begun to burn. The weeks leading to Christmas in the year 2025 blurred into a haze of cold and desperation. Snow fell heavy and relentless, turning Chicago's streets into slushy rivers that soaked through my worn shoes and chilled me to the marrow. Eli's cough deepened. Fever came and went like a thief. I spent nights rocking him in whatever corner we could claim, signing lullabies into his hot palm while my own body shook with exhaustion and hunger. One morning, the free clinic turned us away. No appointments until January. Another day, a church pantry gave us only a single can of beans because supplies are low for the holidays. I divided it into 3 portions, giving Eli 2, watching him eat while my stomach cramped so violently I had to sit down to keep from fainting. Poverty had become a living thing, wrapping tighter each day, squeezing breath and hope from my lungs. At the LondonHouse, the rooftop venue remained closed, a dark scar on the hotel's glittering reputation. Engineers packed up their failed equipment and left, muttering about impossible deadlines. Evelyn Whitaker's fury settled into cold contempt. She passed me in hallways without a glance, as if I were already gone. The viral wager had become a city joke. Late-night talk shows mentioned it, social media memes mocked the deaf dishwasher versus science. Each notification on the staff breakroom computer felt like a slap. I scrubbed floors on my knees until they bled, dizziness a constant companion, numbness spreading through limbs that barely obeyed me anymore. Yet in the darkest hours, after the last guest departed and the city lights glittered beyond the vast windows, the rooftop became my sanctuary and my laboratory. I worked alone, barefoot on the cold oak, tracing vibrations with palms and soles, mapping the discord that no one else could hear. The solution grew clearer each night. Simple vibration-absorbing pads, cut from common American sound-deadening material, placed at precise nodes to bridge the imperial metric clash. Inexpensive, elegant, possible. Jack Riley, Vincent, was never far. He appeared silently, helping lift heavy speakers or steady ladders without being asked. His signs grew more frequent, more intimate. Questions about Eli's fever, offers of warm tea left steaming on my cart, once a small space heater hidden behind the stage with a note, "For your feet." Each gesture deepened the storm inside me. Suspicion still whispered, what did he truly want? But fear was losing ground to a curiosity that burned hotter every day. When his eyes met mine across the dim venue, something electric passed between us, leaving me breathless and unsteady. One night in mid-December, disaster struck again. After a rare, warm meal from a charity drive, Eli and I walked to a laundromat to dry our only set of clean clothes. A group of 5 men from the escalating West Side crew cornered us outside, faces twisted in threat. One shoved me hard against the brick wall. Pain exploded in my shoulder. Another grabbed Eli's coat. Horror swallowed me whole, the world tilted, dizziness crashing in black waves. I fought blindly, nails raking, body shielding my son, though I had no strength left. The rescue came swift and silent. Doors opened. 6 men surrounded the 5 in a perfect circle. Vincent's soldiers, faces I now dimly recognized from previous shadows, stood calm and immovable. Low words were spoken, postures speaking louder than volume. The rivals backed away, hands raised, disappearing into the night. Strong arms helped me stand. A warm vehicle appeared to drive us to safety. I clutched Eli, shaking with aftershock, tears streaming in silence. Vincent observed from a darkened doorway across the street, every muscle rigid. Seeing Clara, fragile as glass, half-starved, yet throwing her body between danger and her child, shattered something inside him. The love that had caught fire now raged uncontrollably, passionate and ferocious, demanding he claim her, protect her, end her suffering with the full weight of his power. He could buy the entire hotel tomorrow, install her in a heated home with doctors on call, wrap her and Eli in safety no poverty could touch. Yet remorse followed like a shadow with teeth. His world had drawn those wolves close. His disguise had prolonged her pain. Guilt over decades of ruthless control, unions bent to his will, rivals intimidated into submission, wealth built on fear, now focused into agony. How could a man whose hands were stained dare cradle something so pure? Back on the rooftop 2 nights later, the city blanketed in fresh snow, I worked late mapping final nodes. Vincent appeared, carrying a small toolbox. He signed, "Show me." Hesitation gripped me, fear of ridicule, of hope, but his eyes held only encouragement. Slowly, timidly, I explained, voice soft when I spoke aloud. The mismatch is here and here. Pads cut to these dimensions will dampen the resonance without changing the design. He listened intently, then produced samples of the exact material I needed, high-quality sheets far beyond what a porter could afford. Shock rippled through me. "Where did you get these, sir?" I signed, voice trembling. He only smiled faintly and signed, "For you." We worked side by side in the dark venue, cutting pads under a single work light. Our hands brushed often, accidental, then less so. Each touch sent sparks through my frozen skin. Confusion swirled with a warmth I could no longer deny. When he steadied me as dizziness struck, his palm against my back lingered. I looked up. His Winter Lake eyes were fierce with emotion. In that quiet, condensed stillness, he signed slowly, "You are brilliant, Clara. The world has been cruel, but you are brilliant." Tears filled my eyes. No one had ever spoken such words to me. The spark from before now flared brighter, warming places long cold. Vincent felt it too, the diagnosis unfolding not just of the venue, but of his own heart. Watching her thin fingers trace precise measurements, hearing her soft voice explain complex acoustics with humble certainty, the fire inside him burned hotter. Love was no longer a feeling. It was a force, passionate and absolute, tearing through every defense. He wanted to tell her everything, his name, his power, the empire waiting to lay at her feet. Yet remorse held him silent. Revealing himself now would overwhelm her, perhaps terrify her. The inner conflict raged, desire to shield her, warring with fear of breaking her further. He reached for a fallen scrap of material. Our hands met. Neither pulled away. In the dim light, snow falling silently beyond the windows, we stayed like that, palms touching, hearts pounding in shared silence. The diagnosis was complete. The solution rested in simple pads waiting to be placed. But something deeper had been diagnosed in the dark. 2 wounded souls recognizing each other across the vast gulf of wealth and poverty, power and powerlessness. The spark had become a steady flame, and flames, once lit, are hard to contain. December 31st, the year 2025, arrived with a sky heavy with snow and a city holding its breath for the New Year's Eve gala. The LondonHouse rooftop had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, white linens draped tables set for Chicago's most powerful. Security teams in discreet suits patrolled every entrance. Yet beneath the glamour, tension crackled. Evelyn Whitaker moved among the preparations like a general before battle, her eyes sharp with triumph. She fully expected my failure to be the final entertainment of the evening. I had not slept in 2 days. Eli's fever had spiked again. I had carried him through snow to an emergency clinic, waiting 6 hours only to be given a prescription I could not fill. We returned to a shelter that smelled of bleach and despair, where a new rule limited stays to 3 nights. That meant tonight, after the gala, we would have nowhere to go. My body was a hollow shell, thin beyond recognition, hands trembling from cold and malnutrition, vision tunneling from exhaustion. Yet the pads were ready, cut and measured in secret, hidden beneath the stage. Vincent, still Jack to me, had arranged everything. A renowned violinist, an old favor called in quietly, agreed to a private midnight rehearsal. The venue was locked, lights dimmed to a single spotlight. Snow fell thick beyond the vast windows, muffling the city into silence. I worked barefoot on the cold floor, placing each pad with shaking fingers, feeling the vibrations shift from discord to tentative harmony. Vincent handed me tools without a word, his presence steady and warm at my side. When the final pad was secured, the violinist lifted her bow. The first notes rose, clear, pure, richer than the hall had ever sounded. No distortion came at 22 minutes. 30 minutes passed, then 40. The music swelled into a soaring adagio that seemed to fill every corner with perfect warmth. Tears streamed down my face. I could feel the beauty through the floor, through my bones, for the first time in my life experiencing music as something whole and unbroken. The final note lingered, then faded into silence. The violinist lowered her instrument, eyes wide with wonder. "It's perfect," she whispered. I stood trembling, shock and relief crashing together so violently the room spun. Dizziness overwhelmed me. My knees buckled. Vincent caught me before I fell, strong arms wrapping around my thin frame with infinite care. I clung to him, face buried against his chest, silent sobs shaking me. For the first time in years, something I touched had not broken, something I knew had been believed. He held me in the hushed venue, snow falling like a curtain around us. Slowly, gently, he tilted my chin up. His winter lake eyes burned with an emotion I could no longer mistake. The air between us thickened, charged. Confusion, fear, the weight of my poverty and his quiet power. All of it fell away in that condensed stillness. Then he kissed me. Not tentative, not careful. A kiss fierce and desperate, passionate and consuming, as if he had waited a lifetime to claim this moment. His mouth was warm against my cold lips, hands cradling my face with reverent strength. Shock exploded through me, dizziness so complete the world tilted again. But I did not pull away. Instead, I responded with a hunger I did not know I possessed, thin arms wrapping around his neck, pressing closer as if I could draw his warmth into my frozen soul. The kiss deepened, intense and burning, tearing through every barrier of suspicion and fear. Tears mixed with snowflakes on my cheeks. His thumbs brushed them away, even as he kissed me harder. We broke apart only when breath became necessary. Foreheads resting together, hearts pounding in shared rhythm. He signed against my palm, voice rough when he spoke. "Clara." Just my name, but it carried everything. Love, promise, torment. Inside Vincent, the fire raged beyond control. The taste of her, salt tears and desperate need, ignited a passion so violent it terrified him. This frail, brilliant woman, half-starved yet unbreakable, was his salvation and his damnation. Love had become an inferno, demanding he give her everything: the penthouses, the protection, the life no cold could touch. Yet remorse followed instantly, savage and unrelenting. He was a man whose wealth came from shadows, whose power rested on fear. To love her this fiercely meant risking dragging her into danger. Guilt over past sins, rivals ruined, loyalties enforced with iron, now screamed that he was unworthy. The inner conflict was a war, desire to possess and protect her, warring with terror of destroying her purity. I felt the storm in him through the tremor in his hands. Confusion flooded me. Who was this man who kissed like a drowning soul finding air? Yet beneath the fear, something new bloomed, a fierce, answering passion. For the first time, I was not invisible. I was wanted, cherished, seen. The psychological shock was overwhelming. A woman who had eaten from dumpsters, who had shielded her child with her own body, now held in arms that felt like safety. It numbed me, dizzied me, tore at every belief about my worthlessness. We kissed again, slower this time, deeper. Snow continued to fall beyond the windows. The venue, now perfect, held us in its quiet embrace. Later, as the violinist discreetly left, Vincent wrapped me in his coat, thick, warm, smelling of expensive wool and something uniquely him. He signed, "Come with me tonight, you and Eli, no more cold." I hesitated, old suspicion flickering, but the memory of his kiss, the promise in his eyes, overpowered it. I nodded, timid and trembling. Outside, his driver waited. We collected Eli from the shelter, fever broken, eyes wide at the warm car, and drove through snowy streets to a Gold Coast building with doormen and private elevators. The penthouse opened into warmth and light, soaring windows, thick carpets, a kitchen stocked with food. Eli's eyes grew huge. He signed, "Big house," over and over. Servants, discreet, kind, prepared a room with a real bed, hot soup, a doctor on call. I stood in the vast living room, dizziness returning at the contrast. My life of frostbite and hunger suddenly enveloped in luxury I could not comprehend. Vincent watched me, eyes tormented. He signed, "Stay, as long as you need, forever if you want." Tears came again. The poor, powerless woman who had nothing now stood in a palace, kissed by a man whose love burned like a brand. Shock, confusion, passion, all of it swirled into a storm that left me breathless. That night, Eli slept in a real bed for the first time in months. Vincent and I stood on the heated terrace, snow falling around us, his arm around my waist. We did not speak much. We simply held each other, two hearts torn open by a love too fierce to contain. The midnight rehearsal had healed the venue. The first kiss had begun to heal us. But the cost of that healing, we both sensed, would be greater than either of us yet understood. New Year's Eve, the year 2025, dawned cruelly cold, the temperature barely rising above zero, wind slicing through the city like a blade. I woke in Vincent's penthouse, still disoriented by soft sheets and warmth, to find Eli already up, signing excitedly about the view of the frozen lake far below. Servants had prepared breakfast, eggs, fresh fruit, warm oatmeal. I ate slowly, afraid my shrunken stomach would rebel, tears coming unbidden at the simple abundance. Only hours earlier, I had been a woman who divided a single can of beans. Now I sat at a marble counter worth more than I had earned in years. The contrast struck like a physical blow. Dizziness washed over me, numbness spreading until Vincent's hand on my shoulder steadied me. His eyes held that same tormented tenderness, love and guilt warring openly. The gala began at 8. The rooftop venue glittered under full lights, tables set for hundreds of Chicago's elite. Politicians in tuxedos, socialites in diamonds, sponsors whose names adorned hospitals and museums. Evelyn Whitaker moved among them like a queen, smile sharp, confident my failure would seal her victory. Cameras from local news and social media influencers captured every moment. The cruel wager had become the night's anticipated drama. I stood backstage in a simple black dress Vincent's staff had provided, clean, fitting, the first new clothing I had worn in years. My hands shook as I checked the pads one final time. Eli watched from a quiet corner with a trusted nanny, eyes wide with wonder. Vincent, returned to his true appearance, beard trimmed, suit impeccable, stood nearby as special consultant, his presence commanding even in silence. The program opened with speeches praising the hotel's resilience. Then the string quartet took the stage. The first notes rose, clear, warm, flawless. 10 minutes passed. 15. 22 minutes, the moment of dread, came and went without distortion. The music swelled, richer than anyone remembered, wrapping the room in perfect harmony. Gasps rippled through the audience. Musicians' eyes widened in disbelief. 30 minutes, 40, an hour. The final movement built to a triumphant crescendo that seemed to lift the entire rooftop toward the stars. Silence fell as the last note faded. Then thunderous applause erupted. Guests rose to their feet, some visibly moved to tears. The mayor approached the stage, voice booming. "A miracle for Chicago!" Phones captured everything. Social media exploded with live streams, declaring the venue better than ever. Evelyn's face drained of color. She climbed the stage, smile frozen, forced to announce, "It appears Miss Clara Hayes has succeeded." The words came through gritted teeth. Applause thundered again, now directed at me. Cameras turned, lights blinded. I stepped forward, legs unsteady, dizziness threatening to buckle me. Vincent's hand brushed mine backstage, steadying, promising. The revelation came moments later. A prominent journalist, recognizing Vincent from past society pages, asked loudly, "Mr. Callahan, what brings Chicago's most influential philanthropist to tonight's triumph?" The room stilled. Whispers spread like wildfire. Vincent stepped into the light, fair-skinned, commanding, every inch the powerful figure the city knew and feared in quieter circles. He took the microphone calmly. "I came to witness brilliance the world almost overlooked. Clara Hayes, not engineers with endless budgets, but a woman of extraordinary talent and courage, saved this venue. She deserves every honor." Applause roared anew. Evelyn stood rigid, humiliation complete. Social media hashtags shifted overnight, from mockery to celebration of the deaf genius who silenced the skeptics. I stood frozen beside him, shock crashing in waves. The man who had kissed me with desperate passion, who had sheltered Eli and me from cold, was Vincent Callahan, owner of skyscrapers, controller of unions, a name whispered with respect and caution across the city. The psychological blow was staggering. A destitute woman who had eaten scraps now stood beside unimaginable wealth and power. Dizziness overwhelmed me. Numbness spread until Vincent's arm around my waist was the only thing keeping me upright. Confusion tore at me. Who was I to this man? Yet the love in his eyes, fierce and unwavering, answered before words could. Inside Vincent, torment reached new depths. Publicly claiming her triumph meant claiming her, exposing her to his world. Love burned hotter than ever, passionate and protective, demanding he shield her forever. Yet remorse followed instantly, savage. His empire's shadows would now touch her light. Guilt over past enforcement. Rivals backed down through fear, deals sealed in back rooms. Now screamed that he had stolen her simple victory by revealing himself. The inner conflict was a storm, joy at her vindication warring with terror of the dangers his name carried. Outside, as guests departed into the snowy night, rival elements tested boundaries one final time. A car followed ours from the hotel, west side plates visible. Vincent's driver took evasive turns. 2 escort vehicles appeared seamlessly. At a red light near the river, the rival car pulled alongside. Windows lowered slightly, threat implied. Vincent's men responded in kind, calm stares, subtle signals. No weapons shown, no words shouted. The light changed. The rival car peeled away, message received. I watched from the warm back seat, Eli asleep against me, heart pounding with fresh fear. Vincent's hand covered mine, steady despite the storm in his eyes. Back in the penthouse, city fireworks blooming beyond the windows, we stood on the terrace. Snow fell soft and silent. He signed, voice low. "I should have told you sooner. I am sorry." Tears filled my eyes, shock, confusion, the dizzying weight of sudden safety after years of cold despair. I signed back, voice soft and trembling. "You saved us, more than tonight." He pulled me close, arms wrapping around my thin frame with reverent strength. We kissed again, fierce, passionate, the new year beginning in fire and promise. The triumph was public. The revelation was complete. A woman once invisible now stood in light. A man once isolated now held his heart's truth. But the cost of that light, we both knew, was only beginning to unfold. The first days of January in the year 2026 arrived wrapped in a hush of fresh snow. But the quiet was deceptive. Chicago's elite buzzed with the story of the New Year's Eve miracle. The deaf dishwasher turned acoustic savior, the mysterious Vincent Callahan, stepping from shadows to claim credit for her discovery. Newspapers called it a Cinderella tale. Social media crowned me an overnight inspiration. Yet inside the Gold Coast penthouse, the contrast between my past and this sudden opulence tore at me hourly. I woke each morning disoriented by softness, thick blankets, heated floors, the scent of fresh coffee drifting from a kitchen larger than any apartment I had ever rented. Eli explored wide-eyed, signing questions about the endless rooms, the stocked refrigerator, the private elevator that opened only to Vincent's key. Doctors visited, quiet, kind, treating Eli's lingering cough and my own malnutrition with vitamins and gentle meals. My body, long accustomed to hunger pangs as constant companions, rebelled at abundance. Dizziness when I stood too quickly, nausea from rich food, hands that still trembled from cold I no longer felt. The psychological shock was relentless. A woman who had shielded her child under bridges now walked marble halls where original art hung beside windows framing the city like a painting. Confusion numbed me. Tears came without warning. Who was I here? What price would this dream demand? Vincent watched me constantly, Winter Lake eyes shadowed with torment. He gave me space, yet never far, bringing tea when I sat staring at the lake, signing stories of his twins, Grace and Michael, who would soon meet Eli, arranging clothes that fit my thin frame without making me feel like a charity case. Our kisses grew frequent, fierce, passionate. Moments when the world narrowed to his mouth on mine, his strong hands cradling my face as if I were fragile glass. Each touch ignited fire in my cold places, love blooming fierce and answering. Yet suspicion lingered in quiet corners. Why had fate chosen me for this man's devotion? The danger outside escalated. Rivals, emboldened by rumors of Vincent's distraction, tested boundaries. One afternoon, as Eli and I returned from a supervised outing to a nearby park, my first steps outside the building since the gala, a dark sedan followed too closely. At a stoplight near Oak Street, it pulled alongside. Windows lowered, hard faces stared. One man signed crudely, mocking my deafness. Horror flooded me, old terror of helplessness returning despite the warmth around me. I clutched Eli, heart pounding, dizziness threatening. Vincent's security reacted instantly. 2 escort SUVs boxed the sedan. Men emerged with calm authority. Words were brief, postures unyielding. The sedan sped away. Vincent appeared moments later, face pale with fury and fear. He pulled us into his arms on the sidewalk, signing rapidly, "You're safe, always." But his eyes betrayed the storm inside. That night, snow falling thick beyond the terrace windows, Vincent led me to the fireside sofa. Eli slept soundly down the hall, his first uninterrupted rest in months. Vincent's hands trembled as he signed. "There is something I must tell you, something from before we met." My heart stuttered. Fear and curiosity mingled, the room suddenly too warm. He began slowly, voice low when he spoke aloud, eyes never leaving mine. 10 years ago, a low-level associate in his organization had married a young woman. The man turned cruel, drinking, threats, violence.